What's going on, everybody? My name's E. Robson, lead ZBrush trainer and training manager here at Maxon, and I'm joined with Noseman, the Shadow.
Noseman,
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I feel a bit shady, but now that's my style. So,
well, it's always awesome to have you here, and I cannot wait for all the commentary and stuff because today we're doing ZBrush UV unwrapping to wrap up, pun intended, the DPP series of the month. So we're going to be talking about best practices and how I approach UV unwrapping within ZBrush. But before we do, we just have a few things to go ahead and do, done, did. So let's get into all of that stuff right now. First things first is Maxon tools. You're here. That's why you're here, because we have them. We have a bunch of them. Everything that Maxon One offers, you can pretty much create anything that your heart desires. So you just go to maxon.net for all that fun stuff. And we also have, like this event, a ton of other events that are coming up. So we have today's UV Unwrap tools. Friday, we actually have a Sculpt Off pre-prep event where you can come and it's an AMA. You can ask us anything about ZBrush, the Sculpt Off, what it is, pertains, what you need to know. And also, too, if you're going to be here, there's a little bit of fun stuff, so we'll get to in a second. But then, of course, we have Maxon Color and the design and animation tours coming up, plus a lot of other fun stuff, including IBC, and also we got Camp MoGraph. So all this fun stuff are coming, so check the events page, as well as if you want to learn any one of our tools, it doesn't matter which tool it is. If you want to learn it, we have a ton of free tutorials on Cineversity where you can come and just check it out and get started. From Cinema 4D all the way down to Redshift and everything in between, you can pretty much come through and just start learning stuff, which is really, really great. And especially for today, if you don't know ZBrush, we have a great getting started in ZBrush that was done by the one and only Anna Carolina, who is super amazing. I always pause this when she blinks. I don't mean to, but that's just what happens. That's TV. And so she's an amazing artist and instructor as well. So she's come through and did a 27-part series. So if you're lost at all in anything that I'm doing today and you don't get your question asked today, check out the Getting Started series because that's going to be really important. And then also, too, student licenses. Probably the best price in the industry, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. I'm not even kidding. We have, I believe we have the best price for student licenses. It's less than a hamburger these days, it seems. So definitely go check that out, especially if you are a student, high school, college, whatnot, your teacher, your instructor. Jump in and see if you qualify for that. And you get all the Maxon One tools, even if you just need ZBrush or just Redshift, that's all the tools, and it's a really good price. That's a 6-month pricing point. And then, of course, the ZBrush Summit. The ZBrush Summit is here. It's coming. It's live. It's in person in Los Angeles, California. So if you happen to be in the LA area, you're not going to want to miss this. It is going to be September 28th through October 1st. Yep, boom, there it is. So definitely going to want to come in. You can come here, see all the amazing artists, plus connect with other people in your local community, or just meet people for the first time. If this is something you're not sure what it is probably the biggest summit for ZBrush in the year ever, and also has one of the best world-renowned Sculpt-Off competitions that happens all the time, which happens once a year at the ZBrush Summit, which is live online, so you can participate. It used to be in person, and it was invite only for a long time, and then eventually, due to all the stuff that happened over the last few years, we won't really get into that, it became an online process, and so many people come across the world to compete, and you could do it from your house. So definitely check that out, all the fun stuff, which relates to, of course, the AMA Ask Me Anything. So if you're prepping for that, go check that out. And then last but not least, too, I don't have a tab for it, so I failed in this one. But if you're a Pokemon trainer and you collect a lot of things, shirts and stuff is all one of them. And Kyle is going to be posting that in the background. Thanks, Kyle, for the get your free t-shirt for the Demystify series for today. So definitely going to want to get into that and collect that shirt. I think it's just shipping you pay for, which is awesome. So check the chat for that. That being said, let's get into some ZBrushing.
No.
Oh, what?
Well, I have a secret.
Oh, you have something.
Yeah, I do have something. So our UV demystifying ends today, but here's a pointer for the next September 4 weeks. I think it's 4 weeks of demystifying post-production. So what's happening? My very good friend Joe Herman from New York, he's preparing. You may remember him from a rigging demystifying he did a while ago. So he's preparing a tutorial series on retargeting mocap and using Cinema 4D's non-linear animation system, and in combination with the Mixamo control rig. And I have to say, having reviewed his videos, I even learned something, and that is saying something. So what's going to happen is in the next few days, look out for the announcement. His series is going to be published. I don't know exactly which day. And starting from next Monday, we will be doing a demystifying post-production. So Joe Herman and me and anyone that wants to tag along, which we are going to address questions and expand on the subject of retargeting mocap using the Mixamo rig and other rigs, and how to use Cinema 4D's nonlinear animation system. And if anyone is curious to see what I'm talking about, you can jump onto my YouTube channel, YouTube/Noseman, at Noseman, I think. And I did something that was related to the Rococo suit. I did part 1 and part 2. The part 1 shows a bit of what we are going to be showing, but Joe's stuff is much more interesting, and he goes into the detail, everything you need to know to get things set up and not have any issues. So look out for that, because I'm personally very excited. Now we can move on to ZBrush and UVs.
All right, all right, all right. I also just dropped your YouTube in the chat for those who want to just click a button. All right. Well, let's get into some ZBrushing. So ZBrush, here we go. Actually, we were just talking about sharks behind the scene, and of course, I got this nice little guppy right here. And today we're going to cover how I would approach unwrapping in ZBrush. Now, just a real quick disclaimer before the question comes in, because it always does come in, and as a trainer, I like to head things off pretty quickly. At this moment in time, there are no UDIMs in ZBrush. So just wanted to throw that out there, because that is a question we get a lot, and we know that is something that is desired. So before you ask, just wanted to let you know. However, there are really good approaches with even just standard traditional UVs going through, and that's what I want to talk about today. And we did have a new tool that a couple cheerleaders like myself were like really hyping in the development team to make life a little bit easier and stuff like that. So that all being said, how do we unwrap in ZBrush? Well, first and foremost, let's go ahead and I'm going to frame this little guppy over here as he's eating my little guy right there. Boop. All right, we're going to stamp that, and then we're just going to hit solo, and we're just going to focus on the body at the moment. Now, what you'll notice too, of course, just like anything we've been talking about UVs this whole time, is that you want relatively some clean topology. And you can see here I have subdivisions, and the topology itself is actually, yeah, it's workable. It's good for what I needed to do. He's not going to be animated, but overall the topology is pretty clean. One thing I've always learned, and I say this a million times, topology can always be better. Even when I think it's perfect, there's always something to tweak. So, but in this case, right now, this is good enough for what we are trying to do. When in doubt, always check with the team you're working with if you want to make sure your topology is top notch. But that being said, we have some pretty decent, we got a halfway decent loop over here for the eyes and some good stuff. So there are some good landmarks to get through here. Now, what I want to focus on is, let's say, in this case, for me, I want to actually get UVs really quickly on this guy. And so if I come down here to my UVs, you'll see here under the UV map on the right-hand side of the tool, you'll see it says UV map, and that there is a grayed area for Morph UV and Delete UV. If you're unsure if your model has UVs, that's tip number 1, is just open up the UV map menu, and you'll see if this area is grayed out, that means there's absolutely no UVs on this specific subtool. And that's
Ian, how many
Yes.
polygons does your shark have? It's a question by Akin48. How many polygons does this model have, approximately?
Wait, what was the question again? I'm so sorry.
How many polygons this shark model has, approximately?
Oh, okay. Yeah, great question. So right now, this guy is about 5.2 active, 5.2 million active total points, and the low res is 20,435. So pretty low row and pretty decent high. A low, low, and a high. Very cool. So now at this point, and that is actually a really good point too. When you're getting ready to unwrap something, you want it to be a low res that can actually be usable and sustain the shape of what you're trying to go for. A lot of times, especially if you're manually retopologizing something, you know, you might have it really, really low and then it doesn't really capture the detail in the high res as well. So when you're going through that stuff, that's a great question. It is important to figure out what it is that is beneficial. And for me, about 20,000 was about where I needed it to be. Now, this is just a ZBrush mesh. So I didn't manually retopologize this. And actually, too, just going to go on record and say that a lot of times, if your character is not going to be animated, you're just going for a one-off shot. Like I usually do some sort of like 3D printing or high-end final image, but I don't typically prep for animation, then I use ZBrush a lot. If I do prep for animation, then I usually fall on the sword of manual retopology. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. This guy was ZBrush, and that's why I would say his topology is fairly good for what we're doing. And so, but you know, there could be a little bit of cleanup, like this guy right here. Got a couple things here. In fact, actually, if I wanted to clean this section up right here, real quick random tip before we get back to UVs, I'm going to open up the Z modeler, go BZM for Z modeler. I'm going to hover over this point, and I'm actually going to go ahead and say stitch. And I'm going to, if I would do this on a model that does not have subdivision, so let's say I just block this out for my low, I'd actually put those 2 points together and do a little bit of a cleanup and actually make this a proper pole right here, and then just kind of smooth that down. So those are little things like that. That could always be worked just a teeny bit. But I digress. We're getting off topic. So let's go ahead and just delete that. Okay, so UV unwrapping. Now I'm going to kick this to its high resolution. I'm going to zoom this back out here. It's actually just clearing that guppy for a second, get more real estate. So now I have this. So how do I get UVs? First thing, let me show you the automated way of getting UVs, which is coming up here to Z plugin. And this little indicator right here, we're going to dock this to the left-hand side of the screen. So this little like timer looking thing, I'm going to click and drag that on over to the left-hand side of the screen, which will dock that menu. Because if not, as soon as I have it over here and I let go, it pops away. So this will keep it stationary. And I'm going to come on down to UV master. And then we're going to have this menu right here. We're going to have a few things to take a look at. First thing is we have just an unwrap button. And typically you'll see it look something like this. We'll have unwrap, unwrap all, meaning it's going to unwrap every single subtool you have. Definitely be careful with this button. Unless you know all your subtools are prepped, unwrap all does all of your visible subtools. And in that regards, if all your visible subtools are not prepped properly, then you could run into a little bit of a hang-up session. So I refrain from using this button unless I'm 100% certain all my subtools are prepped. But then I have unwrap, which will just unwrap the main one. And then I have symmetry, which is usually turned on by default, as well as polygroups, which I believe is actually turned off by default, but I saved it turned on. And then, of course, we'll have like use existing UV seams. So if your model already had UV seams and you needed to re-unwrap it, you can select that to do that portion. And then we have a few other things we'll get into in a minute, but those are the main ones. Down here at the bottom, we do have a work on clone and then some copy UVs, paste UVs, and flatten. Now the work on clone, I want to touch on that for a second because that is how most of us will actually be approaching an unwrap in ZBrush because my model has subdivisions. In fact, it has, I think, a total of 6 subdivisions for this subtool, 5 subdivisions. So that being said, you know, I could just down-res this to subdivision level 1 and hit unwrap. And in theory, that would be fine. I'm just hitting unwrap right now, and it's going to go ahead and do an automated wrap. Now, automated wrap is just guessing on the best point in which it should actually do something. And if I go ahead and take a look at this now and say flatten, it's going to say that you can't do that because you need a model without subdivisions. And I want to be able to see what my UVs look like without having to go all over the place. So this is already the downside of just unwrapping a model that has subdivisions on it. So I'm going to Control Z to make sure that that is turned off, or just delete those UVs. And I'm going to kick that back up to the highest subdivision level. And I'm going to show you what work on clone does. So if I come over here to work on clone, what it's going to do is it's going to create a new subtool on a different canvas, and it's going to bring over just the low-res version of this. So it's only going to bring over the first subdivision out of all of them, which is perfect. That's exactly what I want, because this is identical to the first subdivision of my other mesh. It's just allowing me to work on it independently. So if I have anything that happens where the unwrap, either, you know, a crash occurs, which is very happen, so I'll be the first to admit it. I've crashed unwrapping stuff before. If you don't like something and you want to tweak and you end up, you know, kind of like pushing the model too much or you move some things, then you're working on a model that is not tied to your current project. And that's just a really safe way to keep things on a non-destructive workflow. So now if I go ahead and say unwrap, and we'll do the same thing, we'll do an auto wrap. Depending on the complexity of your model does depend greatly on whether or not it's going to unwrap fairly quickly. And in this case, it unwrapped fairly decently, so didn't even really have time to do much. So now if I come down to the bottom and say flatten, you're now going to see what my UV looks like. And it is beautiful. Look how beautiful this is. But notice the blue grid. I now get a blue grid. And what's cool about this blue grid is that the mesh is actually editable with my Gizmo. So I can actually rotate this around, position this. I can scale this down or scale this up. And what this blue grid is identifying is the 1-to-1 space ratio of my UV. So this is my, or is it 0-to-1 space. So this is my space in which the UV is. Everything inside of this would be considered a relatively good tiling. So everything else that would be outside of it would actually be falling outside of that UV space. So the blue grid here, which is literally just the floor turning on, is a great indicator of showing you how you would actually want to position or scale or decrease the size of your model. So this is a really cool way. Now, the other aspect that I do want to mention is that we are still working in a quote 3D space. And so what we do want to refrain from, if we are going to do any editing, which we can get into a little bit more later, is rotating it so that it's like this. This will not really do you a lot of favors. This might cause more problems than you want. So when in doubt, when you're looking at your UV space here and you do want to make a move, so let's set this back, let's say here, the best thing to do is press and hold Alt and just reset your Gizmo by hitting this little reset icon and then letting go, and then that will ensure that your rotations are nice and true to the floor, which will make sure that it's nice and flat.
Interjection.
Sure.
I told you I'm gonna. So there was a comment from. Let's find exactly who that was, about the computer not being able to handle it. So it was Jay's cover. What comment can you make on that, Ian? What, for a model like this, what would be the spec? Do you need the highest end computer? Because as far as I know, ZBrush can handle extremely large polygon counts with very low system specifications. Can you briefly say something about that?
Yes, absolutely. So a little fun fact about ZBrush, and let's actually switch over to the guppy just for a second while I answer this question to really just, you know, I like having something nice on the screen when I take a moment to answer a question like this. And this is a great question. So ZBrush is actually highly known for being CPU driven and handling high topology like what Noseman had just mentioned. Because it's CPU driven, it actually works really, really well with a lot of older machines. Now, for exact specs, I do implore you to go to the specifications on our Maxon site. In fact, I'll even pull it up while I'm chatting here for a second. If you go to our Maxon site and you look at the ZBrush specs, we do have a set of specs that would actually be something you should look into. But I've even played with ZBrush on a machine that is, you know, like 10 years old. And quite frankly, it's quite impressive with how just robust ZBrush actually is. But I'm going to drop in the comment section right now for you a list of specifications. But I mean, my son has a near 10-year-old gaming machine right now, and I've put ZBrush on there, taken it with me, and it works really, really well. The only difference is that you might not be able to hit as high as some other users. So for example, a machine that's like 10 years old, you might be able to get to like 8 million, maybe 12 million polys for a total. And that's okay. That's actually quite high. Most people think that that's low for ZBrush, but you can get a lot of detail with the right topology at that level. But I've worked with artists that have 250 million polys, and that's just like ridiculous. That's like super high. But depending on the project you're doing, if you're working in VFX, for example, then you're used to models that high. But if you're working in toys, I think my highest project was like, highest current project is like 78 million. But that's because I'm pushing it to some godly, ridiculous amount of just high fidelity detail that almost in some respect is unnecessary. But to answer the question, again, a machine that's around, 5 to 10 years old would still run ZBrush today. That's actually one of the things we pride ourselves on. But I just dropped in the chat requirements that are official that you should take a look at and see what you can do. But again, ZBrush is CPU driven, not GPU, which is half of the black magic that you see here on today.
Thank you for that. You can continue so I can interrupt you later. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do see a thing where somebody says, what if you use UDIMs in another program and bring that into ZBrush? So ZBrush was built at a time where UDIMs did not exist. And this is actually a really fun question, because the reality is that because UDIMs didn't exist, ZBrush's foundation never truly supported it. So we're always talking about what it is to do. I personally don't use UDIMs on a daily basis, but what I have seen is that what artists will do is they'll just bring in their main texture sets manually and apply them if they need to use them inside of ZBrush. So that is something that we could probably talk on a little bit more in length, or I could, or we can like get some documentation on that. But typically what you would do is, if you knew the exact texture set, and this is the important part, if you knew the exact texture set on what part of that model it needs to be, you could come over here to texture set, come in and actually import that. But I know UDIMs gets complicated pretty quickly when you're dealing with hundreds of texture sets at a time. So manually process, might be tedious, but that would be the only way I'm currently aware of doing it, and I've seen other artists do it as well.
So with UDIMs, one of the main principles is that your UVs lie outside your main UV tile and they're offset by one UV tile unit. I think the question relates to that. If I've saved UDIMs or manually created UDIMs from Cinema 4D, because you can do it manually, and your UVs lie outside the UV tile, does ZBrush wrap them around?
You mean like this, if it was off here in tile? That's a great question. I'd actually have to play with that to find out that answer. I've not seen that approach at all. So I would have to play with that, to be honest with you. That's a question I would need to like dive in a little bit deeper, and I would gladly do that to get back a proper answer. The problem here is that without a lot of manual setup, there's no way of knowing where this grid actually ends outside of this space. So even doing something like this, I would not be able to guarantee that that would actually read well. But there might be something, and this is worth trying. This is some of the stuff that we are doing internally at Maxon, is trying to play with different workflows. So I would actually, Noseman, if you have a model, I would love to grab that model from you and then see if or we'll go off and create a UDIM in Cinema 4D the way you were showing me. And then
I'm going to do this exactly right now with the cube and offset the UV. I'm going to send it to you directly.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Yeah, please resume what you were saying, because
Sweet. No, absolutely. And this is the cool part, I mean, I love this stuff. All right, so moving back in. So now we have a single unwrap. So I'm going to show you that was the automated unwrap. And just to recap real quick, what I had done, if I were to go back in time, boop. I went back in time, and here it was. I just went and hit unwrap. Now my model's not symmetrical, and this is something to note too. But even though I had symmetry turned on, it still did the unwrap for me. But if my model is not symmetrical, as you can clearly see, there's no way this is symmetrical, then I would actually advise you to turn symmetry off and say unwrap instead, and that this would actually generate a better UV, because what ZBrush is looking at when you have symmetry turned on, it is looking at both screen left and screen right, and then it's making its calculations and making sure that everything truly is symmetrical. So I did a unsymmetry unwrap, and I'm going to go ahead and say flatten, and it gave me roughly the same results, and that's okay. So now how do I get this over to my main model? Well, down here at the bottom under UV master, I have a thing called copy UVs, and all you need to do is click copy, move over to my main project, come over here to my selected mesh. So if I hit solo, there's my selected mesh, come back under UV master and hit paste UVs. And notice I didn't drop subdivisions at all. I just pasted it on my high res. Because they are identical, you can now actually see if I come over here to UV map and say Morph UV, give it a second. There's my UV, which is identical to this one here. You can see that that copied over perfectly the way that I wanted it to copy. So in this case here, that's your straightforward approach. Now I'm going to go ahead and Control Z. Also, just a really fun fact, if you actually, let's come back over here. With Morph UV, a lot of times this is defaulted at bump 50. It's defaulted at bump 50 because what it's basically doing is it's like a little reminder that you can actually paint and sculpt on this surface while it's in this area. And this is a benefit to working in ZBrush with UVs, is that I can come here and I can actually sculpt some elements, or I can hit, some paints. Let's do a little bit of red, and I can paint a little bit, say something like that. And when I unmorph this, hit F for frame, you'll see here that I have the sculpted area and the paint on my actual model. So that's a really cool little fun fact about Morph UV, is I'm able to actually unwrap it and paint across. And the benefit to that is if you really need like a true straight line, you need to be able to put a line down somewhere. Let's say I want to paint a straight line that goes across, and I really need it across his head. Well, here's his eyes right here. So I'm going to come up here to stroke. I'm going to come up here to lazy mouse, and I'm going to go ahead and just paint a straight line across this head. And then when I morph this back, you'll see here that that's actually curving across that head exactly where I painted at. So there is some real good benefit to that motion. Hold on one sec. I'm getting a loud beeping.
It's not me. 1, 2. No. If
No,
you go
I
to
literally- one
if you go to the private chat in StreamYard, there is Ian, and you can hear the noise. He'll be back. I just prepared a file for Ian to test the UV offset. So once he's back, unless there was an intrusion, which means that I need to learn and ZBrush in a few seconds and fire it up. Oh yeah, he's muted. That's why we can't hear any potential violence going on. Let me see if there are any questions here so we can reply. Let's see. Tattoon, whoa, Noseman is here. Or am I not? All right, I'm the Noseman's shadow. So basically what I did, and what I'm going to do is just before, to show you how I'm preparing a model. So I took this person from the asset manager, ripped all the materials out and just kept the mesh. And in the UV edit, what I did was I did an automatic UV packing and took all the UV polygons and moved them from the main tile outside. Now, we did cover, the UDIM concept, and the thing with UDIMs is that the UV tile, this 0 to 1, if you offset everything by an extra 1 unit, so if I go to all these polygons here, go to polygon, select them all, these usually should be placed within the UV tile. And this is just for anyone that doesn't know what the UDIM question is about. So they all reside in the normal tile. If I offset them by 1, Cinema 4D has the ability to read them, because when you create a material in Cinema 4D, let's create a new material in your standard, our standard material. If you put it here, you can offset this left or right, and the material will apply to the object unless you have tiling on, which in that case it will repeat the material, the texture, for every tile, and the tiles go in the negative, in the positive for the U, in the positive for the V, negative for the V, and so forth. What UDIM does, which we cover in Cinema 4D, the way we solve this problem is by putting a material in a selection. That's why you can have multiple materials on the same object, on the same tile, overlapping, and yet only see a material in one particular selection. And I think that was, Ian has just vanished from my screens. Hopefully everything is okay, but I think they had a power loss. So now you will have to bear with me, which I have no idea of ZBrush. And the reason is I haven't put a minute into try and learn it. And that way, that's my excuse for not being as good in something. You just don't learn it. And you can always say that, well, I haven't dealt with this. This is not my expertise. Anyhow, so in the UDIM is a naming concept that tells you, if I take these and subtract one from here, let me subtract that. So this a set of polygons lies on the main UV tile. This is tile 0.0. This is tile, I think it's 1.0. It takes the UV first, the U first and the V second. So in the UDIM concept, what you will do, you will create, let's say, two materials. Again, this is equivalent to telling Cinema 4D that a particular material will be applied on a particular selection. I'm going to delete everything from here. And I'm going to say this material, material 1, is applied, I've got it already there, to selection 1. So you need to save a selection. So store selection, there it is. Let's call this selection 1 just for clarity. And you say that this material is applied selection 1. So if I make this red, you'll see that only these polygons are colored because the material is confined to this selection. In using a UDIM approach, what you would actually do is fairly different. In this particular case, if I select, or let's select the whole model here, and here are my UVs. In this particular case, what you would do is take the material, remove the selection. What I'm going to show you is the way you will set it up in a UDIM concept. Right now, everything is red because we have tiling on. If I turn off tiling, then this material over here, the main material, is going to take only what's in tile 111 because the tiling is off. The rest of the material is getting the default. So then you would ask, okay, how do I apply material to the rest? What you do is you create this secondary material, you make it green to see the difference, you apply it to the object, and initially you will see it covers everything. Turn off tiling, now it will cover only this area, and you offset it by 1. So what we're doing in this case is we're telling this material without tiling to target the main tile, which was here, by an offset of 100%. So it actually targets only the UV polygons that lie adjacent to this. And the great thing about this method is that it's not only confined to 100%. If I set this to 1.6, which this measurement is based on the offset now, and I set this to 200, then it's only going to be applied to this. So you can use materials targeting only specific UVs if you offset them, and just by making sure that tiling is off and the offset is the equivalent, the equivalent one you need. And in the UV, in the UDIM, let's say, world, the way you do this is by naming your files in a way that they target that extra thing. So the naming of your texture contains the offset amount. So the texture I would put in here will have a, at the end, it will say 2.0 because it's 2 tiles to the right. If it was up here, it would say 0.1. If it was here, it would say 1.1. If it was here, it would say 2.1. So that is how you make these material specific definitions in the UV space. Now, so we can manually create things by naming them appropriately and offsetting textures in Cinema 4D. Then when you export this, the material offset won't be recorded, but then you'll go and name each texture appropriately and import it in the program that uses UDIMs, and it will assign everything. But unfortunately, we can't do this automatically. And the question I was trying to get Ian to solve before his office exploded. The worst case scenario always. So when we find out that his office didn't explode, we'll all be happy, right? So, oh, there you go. Ian is back. So this is Ian. We can't hear you. So,
Hello.
oh, I was explaining to our users, just in case they missed it, the concept of UDIMs. And in the private chat, I put a link of a Dropbox where the human, and if you look at my screen revert to save project, yes, where the human here has the UVs are all offset by 1. So if you open that, do you want me to save it as an FBX or something? What would be your preference for importing this? Oh, Ian has frozen. Ian, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Okay, you can hear me. Your camera is frozen. I'll bring you back when it's unfrozen. What format would you want this to bring it directly into Redshift? Or you can open this and do a Go Z or something like that. Although that may be handled by Cinema 4D. I'll save it as an FBX or OBJ. What would you prefer? FBX. Excellent. So since everyone is watching here, let's go and do an FBX export of this. And I'm just going to revert to save just in case I did a mistake here in the process of talking. Let's go to export and go and do FBX. Move this aside and let me go to the appropriate folder. I'm doing it on my other monitor and I'm saving it with the same name under FBX. And then I'm picking up that folder. I'm right clicking and saying copy Dropbox link and pasting it for Ian to provide us with a solution. Ian is going and coming. Oh, many things are happening. So let's see if there are any questions here since people have commented. Can you explain this section? I missed which section coordinates. All UVs must be created within 0, 1 space. Okay, so this is the reason why UDIMs are required in other software is because the ability to apply a material on a subset of your polygons, just so that we can do in Cinema 4D, it doesn't work. It's just 2 different approaches for the solving the same problem. I think Ian is back. If we can have your screen, sir.
Yeah, give me. Okay, first off, there's a loud beep that just happened in my office, and then all of a sudden, power just went out, and I think my the backup battery in my power supply just gave. So unfortunately, I had to like reboot everything. And then my computer wanted to update everything that was preloaded. So my apologies on that. Let me get my screen back up and running.
Yes.
Noseman, thank you for coming in, taking over, and saving the day. You're a rock star, as you know. All right.
I know that. Thank you. So you can now continue. Let's share your screen. Yep, it's on. And yeah, the model FBX is in the private chat, so you can download it and solve that mystery once and for all.
Okay, perfect. I'm downloading that right now, and then we'll get back to our regularly scheduled program, which is really cool. Okay, I think that already downloaded. So if you're new to importing an FBX into ZBrush, here we go. We're going to go ahead and come over here to import on the right-hand side of the tool. And I'm going to go to downloads. And all right, there it is. I'm offset UV. Going to go ahead and open this bad boy up, say OK, and say stop sharing. There's our beautiful guy right there. Beautiful. And then I'm just going to come up here to Z plugin and double check there's no subdivisions. So I'm going to go to UV master and I'm going to go ahead and now at this point, let's just go ahead and say morph. Now here's the thing. So morphing it shows me the tile in which it is morphed at. So if I unmorph this, go ahead and say work on clone and then flatten this. There it is. Yep, it is tiled off in 1 space over to the left. So that's very good to know. Good to know.
Oh, wait. This is interesting because it's reversed. So the tile should be, if you go around this to bring your tile on the left, there you go. This is what, and reverse the other axes as well. Do a second reversal, vertical reversal. There you go. That is what I see on my screen. Just for reference for everyone, take a mental snapshot of that and take a look at this. So you can see this little thing on the bottom left, this one 2 spaces right. So I'm going to bring back Ian's screen. So it does come in. So you do get it. That's fantastic.
Perfect.
Can you paint on it with the...
Can I paint on this?
Or do you need to move it to the original tile?
No, that's the beauty part. So I wouldn't want to paint on this in the cloned version, but in the non-cloned version, yeah, absolutely, I could work on this. So I could come through, and this is the beauty part. Let me just go ahead and say fill color. So let me fill it with this white, turn it with red, grab a red paint, and then come on in here, and you can see now I can actually work on this. Go ahead and unmorph that. And you can see, boom, I just painted down the legs. So there you go. Absolutely. Again, when working with a lot of different tiling sets and stuff like that, you know, there's a lot of different ways to go through it. And this is why we have these conversations, because it's important too, as us as trainers too, to also play with this stuff. And this stuff we try to do in the background. So I really, dude, this was super beneficial. So thanks for working with me on that.
A nice little comment. I'm going to show it up. So ZBrush secretly supports UDIMs. Well, if you don't lose the data, and this is a general concept that if the data is retained, which proof we just showed that it does work, that means that although we do not have both in Cinema 4D and ZBrush the ability to work with UDIMs automatically, we do have a way of importing UDIM data. Now, to what extent, if you have more than one tiles and all that, that's a different story. But at least you have one step in knowing that you don't lose the data. That's one of the most important things with interchangeability between software, that you don't lose in integral data. So thank you very much, Ian, for showing that.
No, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the next portion of it. So we covered before a random computer malfunction. Before all that stuff, we covered how to automatically unwrap really quickly just to get something. Now I want to show you another method that is really common, and then I'm going to show you what's been added into ZBrush, which is now new in 2023 and one of my preferred ways of working, or at least a combination of that in the second version. So right here, I'm going to go ahead and do this. We're going to come back, and I want to unwrap this guy again, and I want to come through here and say work on clone. And here's my clone. He's super beautiful. And now what I want to do is I want to control the unwrap just a little bit more. So an older way of doing this is actually to come here to enable paint control. And then you would have a few options open up. You would have a protect and an attract, and then an erase and a density and stuff like that. The easiest way to go about this is if I wanted to say protect something, like I wanted to protect his face. I don't want any seams and stuff like that on the face, right? I would want to come through here and protect this area. But if I want to attract some areas, then I would actually take this area right here, and I would paint this area this way. Say this is where I might want a seam on the belly, just as an example. And you can come back through and say, you know what, go back to protect, maybe paint this area over here, and maybe paint this area over here. You can go through this and you can get some pretty interesting results. And then if I say, you know what, turn off symmetry, there's no polygroups, go ahead and say unwrap. Now, if I want to check my seams, give it a second, it's still unwrapping, I'd be able to come through and then check those seams and then maybe flatten it out and see what happens. So this is a more older way of coming through and actually checking. And you could see, okay, so where I drew the blue, it was actually trying to create some cuts. And then where it was red, it protected those areas. And if I were to say flatten this out, you would see I got something like this. Now, this still is not super ideal. In fact, in all honesty, I would just much rather just say unwrap it automatically. If I don't care what the UVs look like, I just need an unwrap. I would rather do that. It's faster, and it actually gave me what I consider to be better results than this. But of course, I just threw a bunch of paint down, and you could take your time. However, there's a little bit more we could do with this to actually make this a little bit easier. So let me delete that instead. And now let me focus your attention to the Polygroups section. So we're going to turn off Enable Control Paint. And we're going to actually break this up into some polygroups. So I'm going to grab the select lasso, which if you don't know, the select lasso has a little hidden function, which is I can actually hover over an edge and hide an entire loop. So I can come through and just say, I want to hide this loop. Come in here, maybe hide that loop right there. And of course, if your topology is really, really clean, then you'll get some nice trimming. Say hide that loop, and then come through here. And I'm just eyeballing this really quickly for show and tell. So maybe something like this. And then let's just do this loop. Okay, so now I have this. So what can I do with this? Well, what I can do is I can actually come over to the right-hand side and say Polygroups, and I want to say Autogroups. Now, each section is auto-grouped a different color. And I'm going to switch that by hitting Control-Shift and just clicking and dragging an empty space, letting go, which then hides one section of the model and shows the other side. Say auto-groups of this as well. So now I have these different polygroups. Now, what's going to happen here is when I have polygroups selected, and there's actual polygroups for ZBrush to identify, when I say Unwrap now, you're going to see a much different approach to what that UV would look like. And if I go ahead and say Unflatten, now you're going to see that I have islands, right? I have groups here that I can actually come through and scale or shrink, manipulate, rotate, move this stuff around. Say maybe I want this right here, and clear that mask out. Perfect. And of course, too, I can now move this around in infinite space. And then now this is a different approach to it. Now, of course, again, we just sped through this really quickly, but hopefully this generates the idea of how you can do that. And for a long time, me personally, since they implemented this feature, I don't even know when it was implemented. So I'd say for the last 5 years, this is how I've been approaching UVs in ZBrush, because it's really easy to come through and identify your polygroups, especially if you're already using them for selection sets. And then again, just copying those UVs, going back to my main model, and then hitting paste. And then once that paste, give that a second, same thing, come down here, Morph UV, and you'll see that that copies over really, really quickly. And look at that, got a floating mouth with a guy on it, which is not scary at all.
I have a question, Ian. I have a question.
Sure.
So if you have a model that has random UVs, let's say 20 little UV polygon islands, and you go to your 3D mode in ZBrush and you start painting, and part of your painting crosses over the seams, will that create a visible artifact, or will it paint like in Cinema 4D's body paint? If you use projection painting, you can avoid that. How does it work if you're painting on the 3D model, not on the UVs, but on the actual 3D model?
Okay, great question. So not in this section, but in this section.
Exactly.
It should give you a pretty seamless approach. So if I were to come through and just say like maybe paint white here, and then maybe come through here, and actually let's do a different one. Let's do the Damien standard. So let's go B for brush, D for Damien, S, and then come through. I know that there is a seam right there. So then if I come through and unmorph that, did I paint where there was not a seam? I did paint where there was not a seam. Let me just, I know there's seams somewhere. There you go. Perfect. Unwrap that.
Okay, yeah, quite a few seams, I would say.
Yeah. So it will cross over, and it will showcase well in ZBrush. Whether or not it showcases well in other applications, this is where the conversation of your mesh should always be as good as possible, and you should control your seams as much as possible, is always helpful. And these are some of the ways that you can do that. You can, with a really good polygroup selection set, like if I took the time to really clean this up here and made this so that I'm actually painting out my sections or controlling my seams with these polygroups, then I absolutely would be able to get nicer seams and then be able to actually control the fall off or where that comes through. But inside of ZBrush with UVs, as long as you're painting and stuff, it doesn't really showcase any artifacts as you're painting across. Now, if I'm painting in this mode here, and I come across like this,
oh yes.
Now this section in itself might create a little bit, like if I were to do this and then come in, you might get what's a dead stop, and then that's going to cause some issues there. So you'd want to make sure that when you're painting on the model overall, this is going to blend in well because I'm actually sculpting on the model in its original form. But if I'm doing it on the UVs itself, here's a better material to showcase, that's going to give us a little bit of artifacting, and that's not going to be helpful. So depending on how you approach it, once the UVs are there, it's fine. But in here, yeah, that will create some sort of artifacting.
I wanted to say something. That's why I asked this question. So if you don't require, how often do you require to work with UVs inside ZBrush?
Me actually more often than not. Even though I come from the toy world and stuff like that, I've done a lot of stuff for games and film. So my for games and animations, not necessarily films, just animations. Like so I use them pretty often. I just don't go too deep into the rabbit hole of UVs as much. I would say maybe about 50% of my work is UV.
Okay, so my advice, anyone that doesn't require to do their UVing inside ZBrush, Cinema 4D has this automatic UV packed mode, which is basically the Ministry of Flat algorithm, and just to show you where it is. So if I remove this character and I right click and I say material, set up UV from projection, and go and say here automatic packed UVs. This is the automatic UV packed. I just need to make sure that my UVs are in the right position here. Now, this may seem quite odd as an unwrapping, but the algorithm is optimized for using these UVs for 3D painting because it maximizes the area of your tile, therefore providing better texel density. So if you do not necessarily need to do your UV unwrapping inside ZBrush, which as you can see you can always flip to Cinema 4D, do an automatic UV packed, and then bring it back for painting to ZBrush because it's going to give you better texel density. And that's all I have to say for that.
Perfect. So, all right. Thank you, Noseman. So yeah, so going back to, that's another way that you can go ahead and do it, do polygroups with UV controls. Now, the last way I want to showcase, let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I made a lot of sculptural changes on that. So that mesh is, I would consider that mesh to be probably not the best for this next demo. So I'm going to go ahead and just say work on clone and get a new clone out. And then it's kicks the skin shade 4, but I want it like this. Okay. So now the last way and the newest way that we've actually started doing UVs inside of ZBrush is actually with the Z modeler brush, and more specifically identifying the creases in which you can unwrap. And this was one that I personally was like, we need to get this needs to happen because there's so many instances. And let me show you on a simpler mesh what I mean by this. So let me actually just come back over here real fast to this guy, and I'm going to insert just a basic cube. Cubes are always my favorite to showcase this, and I'm going to get a better cube real quick. So I'm going to say polygroup like that. Perfect. That should be fine. I didn't mean to duplicate that. Okay, now I'm going to come through here, and again, with that polygrouped one, just showcasing this in a little bit more an extreme. If I were to do group by normals, and I needed to unwrap this cube, and I needed all those sides to be quickly unwrapped, then I could do it this way, right? This is something that like a lot of times I'll see people do where they'll say like, boom, my cube's unwrapped and it has all those basic planes. And again, bump to 50. If I wanted to look at that flat, I could do this. However, let's say I don't want all those other sections unwrapped, but I do still want to keep those polygroups, but that's not the UV that I actually want. Maybe I just want to unwrap a little bit more traditionally. This is where the creased edges will come into play. So if I grab the Z modeler brush now and I hover over this edge and I say crease, and I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, let's crease partial. So I'm going to crease this edge right here, this edge, this edge, this edge, and this edge, just as a quick thing. Now if I go under, we're not going to be looking at UV Master anymore. That's just the plugin that was written a long time ago. Now what we're going to be doing is actually going to go under that UV map menu under the tool. And there you'll see here in 2023, it got a little cleaned up. And there's a new menu called Create Unwrap. And underneath that, we have Unwrap by Creased Edges. And we also do have a Symmetry button. And we also have a auto seams detector. So I'm going to turn off Symmetry just for a second. and just focused on the creased edges. So if I unwrap this and I go ahead and say morph, you'll see that where there were, and this was a terrible unwrap, by the way, by yours truly, but as you can see here, that this was actually unwrapped by those creased edges. Now, the cool part with the morph section is that maybe I actually want to add a couple more creased edges. Like, let's say I want to add a couple creases here and here, maybe here, because this is currently unwrapped in its current moment, but I'm going to add these creases in on this section right here and like right here, just because I can. Why not? I'm going to unmorph this. I'm going to go ahead and unwrap by new creased edges and then unwrap this again. And you'll see here, I got a different unfold at this point. So with the creased edging, I can now quickly come through and actually identify certain spots within my mesh. Now, if we go back to a more complex mesh, there is a nice little fun tool here, and I believe it was this guy right here, which is we can use shortest path with our creased edges to make this easier. So if I hover over, let's say, a point right here, and I'm going to go creased shortest path, and I pick this edge right here, and then maybe I pick this edge over here, you'll see now that ZBrush is identifying the shortest path in which to create that crease. So I can quickly rotate around my model. I'm doing this really ugly, by the way, but just really fast. This is more just like kind of to prove a point. If I come in here and I say, okay, that part right there, beautiful. And then why not? Let's just come through here and just say, let's pretend we're doing a good job. Let's do that. And I'm just going to say like this point right here, boom. Okay. Just for fun, right? Now, if I do auto unwrap in this part here, it's going to unwrap based on those creases. Now, I'm not going to get a good unwrap, but just to show it's in exaggerated form, here's the unwrap. And now those are those creased edges. And it was able to identify that. So you could quickly, with creases, now figure out where exactly you want your scene to be. So again, these are just a new added tool in 2023. So if I wanted this fin in this point to, you know, this fin needs to be its own section, and this fin needs to be its own section, right? This is the section I want to work at. And then maybe I want to split this in half. So I'll say, you know, let's do a partial edge loop here, and let's just crease that section there as an example. Now go ahead and say unwrap again, and then unmorph that, and then those fins will split off with the proper selection. And that's the identifying. I am kind of speeding through this and kind of just quickly throw casing, that's not even a word, but like showcasing the ability to use this feature. And you can see there's now that hole where that crease lied, and then you would have that fin. And once you actually have established that you're all done and everything's all done, if you use creases in ZBrush for other purposes, like you want to keep a nice sharp edge on something, once you have the UV unwrap, you don't need to keep that crease anymore. So I can come over to geometry, crease, and I can say uncrease all. And now all those creases are gone, but my UVs will still be there because it was just there as a basic target for ZBrush to know, hey, that's exactly what I wanted that to do. Now, if you did this where you went to work on clone, like we did, like we did here, this was a clone, you can actually then copy that UV on over under UV master, go back to your main model, and then you can go ahead and paste that on, and then it will update on the fly. And even with the creased edge approach, even though it's in another menu, if I needed to clean this up, if I flatten this out and needed to clean this up, I can come in here, flatten everything. Now notice there's no polygroups. I'll come back over to polygroups, autogroups. And now with the gizmo, I can control shift, grab a section, clear this out. And maybe this section of the tile just needed to be a little bit bigger. And maybe this one over here. So I'm just control shift tapping. And now I can reorganize my tile in this UV space. Clean that up just a little bit. So you can see that even if I scale this, say, okay, clear that mask, go ahead and say unflatten. Notice it's the object still there. Go ahead and say copy that UV, come over here and paste that UV. So those are the ways in ZBrush that you can actually unwrap pretty quickly. And I'm actually a big fan. I was one of the guys pushing for that last little, for the UV, the creased edges. I thought it was a really cool idea and something that I've been using a lot more lately.
Ian,
yes.
So I may have missed something. So you change the UV layout, you copy and paste it, but the paint strokes remain on the correct portion of the UV. Did I see that, or I lost my concentration and I saw something else, and I was just hallucinating here?
You mean the paint on this model, when I copy and paste the UVs, it didn't distort?
So if you change the UV configuration on your model, usually what happens is that whatever you've painted on that texture will appear somewhere else on your UVs because you're moving your UVs around. Did you just copy and paste and the paint strokes remained in the right places as compared to the UV?
Yes, correct.
So you can retarget the painting you've done on one model on the same model with a different UV configuration and retain the actual texturing of that object?
In theory, yeah, because here's the other thing. This isn't a map yet. This is still vertex color. So this is still vertex color. This is not a map. I haven't even created my texture map yet.
Okay,
I haven't come in here. Now that's gonna play different, and that's a good point. So glad you asked that, because yeah, what we're seeing right now, this is just me creating UV after I've done the paint job and everything is good to go. But I still have not created any of my maps. Once I want to create, like if I want to create a texture map and lock this now to that UV structure and get that paint properly brought over to a proper map, that's when, now that I have a UV, I can come over to the right-hand side under the tool menu, go to texture map, and say new from Polypaint.
Okay, I thought I was witnessing magic, but if it's vertex maps, see, I don't know ZBrush. So I asked a silly question and everyone corrected me in the comments. Thank you so much for bringing me back to reality. We can erase this from the final video. Move on. Nothing.
No, you're good. You're good. So yeah, and this is also something too I want to point out. A lot of times when you get a file from someone, or you've been working on multiple different subtools, and you turn on your wireframe and you noticed that your wireframe looks black like this, and you start painting. This happens a lot, where then you'll start painting. You're like, yeah, I'm painting, but you're like, nothing's happening. This is because somebody established that there is a texture map that is there, and so you want to be able to turn that texture map off and then start painting. But once I turn that texture map on, it overwrites anything I done underneath it, unless I reestablish that vertex color from Polypaint. And if I were to do that again, now look at the fact that this is the texture, and then that came through, and now that picked up the next texture. So that's how I would actually bake the vertex color onto a map officially.
So, oh my God, this is opening so many avenues. All right. So
I like making you think, sir.
If I have an object in Cinema 4D that has vertex colors, a vertex color tag, and I exchange it using GoZ, does that vertex information come through? Is that something that GoZ supports?
Yeah, it should.
Oh my. I think I've just invented a new way of baking on different... Okay. I'm going to let this... keep going. This is interesting. Keep going.
Yep. Do we have any other questions? Because as far as UV goes, approaching UVs, this was pretty much it. There's not a whole lot of complexity to UVs in ZBrush, and a lot of artists, including myself, what we end up doing in ZBrush for the most part is we will use UVs really quickly to generate the maps that we need to get from point A to point B. I.e., I'm a huge fan, especially in the toy world. Believe it or not, I'm a huge fan of ZBrush to Substance Painter workflows, because there are techniques and stuff like that I can actually use height map information and color information and bring that back to showcase my final model. So there are UVs used in lots of different ways, and I'm somebody who doesn't need UDIMs on a regular basis. Therefore, this is something that you can just quickly unwrap and get through, at the end of the day. As Noseman showcased earlier, if he makes a set of UDIMs and brings in the ZBrush can recognize those and take a look at what it is that is there. If you want to start editing that in ZBrush, then that's something that's not truly, like, there's no UDIM editor outside of what there's no UDIM editor in ZBrush, just the way you can edit UVs inside of ZBrush. Hopefully I didn't lose anybody with that mouthful of information, but that's pretty much all I have to showcase for UVs in ZBrush. Want to just check the chat, make sure we're not missing any questions. Yeah, exactly. It's magic.
It is magic. Exactly, it's magic.
Yep.
So just to explain to our viewers what my leap of imagination was, in Cinema 4D we can bake textures, and at the same time in Cinema 4D we can take a texture, and using the vertex color and the shader field, we can transfer the color information from a texture, a painted image, onto the vertices. So the process would be take a model that is textured, subdivide it to a very high resolution with the same keeping the UVs. You can do that in Cinema 4D. And let's put our faces up here so you can see my shadow clear. So subdivide your model to a great extent. And while it's got its texture on it, use a color, a vertex color with a shader field to transfer that same information on the points. Then you send that with the vertex information to ZBrush, and you do any touches and all that. At the same time, you can take a model with low resolution and a different UV layout and bring that to ZBrush, but the same 3D topology. And you can do this transfer because now it's vertex maps from one object to the other. But I think you can even do that in Cinema 4D as well, now that I'm thinking of it. Because once you have the color encoded on the vertex, just like ZBrush does, then reading it from the texture or writing it to a texture by just creating a vertex color shader and baking that is possible. What you just showed me and how ZBrush works with transferring color in UVs actually opened the door to a potential workflow between Cinema 4D and ZBrush or Cinema 4D itself. I'm very excited. I'm very excited.
Oh yeah, that's some of the stuff that you're talking about right now is what I'm actually playing with in the background a little bit. I'm currently learning Cinema 4D a little bit more at a higher level, thanks to you and actually all of our other training sessions and trainers here. They've been so gracious to help me get more comfortable with Cinema 4D, as it's not something I really used a whole lot before I came onto Maxon. And those workflows back and forth have really started opening doors as well. So yeah, 1000% agree, and would love to explore that more so then we can share with our audience.
There's a question.
Yes.
By Harsh saying, sorry for this question. Yeah, apologize for asking questions. That's our job. If you stop asking questions, we're out of work. So keep going. It says, can you tell me how to fix a seam in UV? I unwrapped a bangle and wanted to apply alpha using Photoshop, but not able to fix the seam. Now, maybe this, you can interpret this a bit better. What I want to say about Photoshop and UV unwrapping is, depending on your UV layout, it's very hard for a human to identify where the brushstroke, so to speak, starts on one UV island and ends at the other UV island. If you have a structured UV unwrap where the seams are hidden under the bellies, under places where are not visible, then that's not a big problem. You can go to Photoshop or any other paint program and do things. But if you have a bunch of UV islands like the one I'm showing here, it's impossible to know to which parts of the model these polygons are connected. You can go and identify them in a 3D model. In these cases, for something like this, doing fixes in Photoshop, you will find them extremely challenging. And that's my interpretation of this. If you have something to say on this, Ian, this question, I'll be very interested to hear it.
No, you actually touch on a subject. There is a lot of manual work in UVs in general. However, what I can show you too real quick, there are a few ways to check your UVs with some texture maps to even get an idea. I did some manual painting in Photoshop when I worked at Funko for a few big projects, and that was always kind of nightmarish. But if I wanted to check my UVs first, then this is something we didn't really get into. What does it look like? How is it being mapped around? So you can get a visual representation of that. Then what you can do is we do have a checker inside of ZBrush. So if I were to hit the comma key and open up my texture in this section right here, so hit the comma key, it's just this light box up here, boop. And then underneath texture, you have master checkers, or UV master checkers rather. And then I can actually double tap this and get this texture up. And then I can come over here to my texture and actually come in and get that apply. And you can see actually what that is doing for you. And then at this point, what you can do is you can actually, at least this is something that I've been playing with on the side. Again, just following on the sort of what Noseman basically said, I do agree with. But if I come over here to this section, and maybe I just stamped it so I have two sharks. And then let me get that clone back. So I have this clone here, say new texture, and then just kind of slap that guy on there for just a second, turn this off. Now, if I go ahead and flatten this out, you know, again, if I were to come through and maybe select this guy, now I don't have polygroups. Let me go polygroups, autogroups, turn on my gizmo by hitting W, come over, and then let's shrink this down like quite a ways, and then go ahead and just unflatten this real fast. And then now I want to remap that texture. I should see a difference, which I'm not seeing a difference. Let me create a new texture on that first and then bring that back in. I'm not seeing a difference. Interesting. Usually when you, interesting. Okay. You know what? Yeah, that's a little, that should give me a difference visually, I would think. Okay. Well, you know what? I'm gonna need to play with that for a little bit. But to your point, yes, I agree. I do agree with you. Sorry about that. Went on a random tangent. It did not work the way I thought it was going to work.
Someone commented there is a difference on the stomach.
Oh, yes, there is. Okay. Wow, I just did not see that. Thank you. My eyes are not doing. It sounds like somebody has a case of the Mondays.
I want to reply to something. It says, that is what I'm talking about. UVs suck. Yeah. Well, it's not. I mean, right. The example I always give. Let's say you're a goat herder and you want to eat goat soup, and you skin you slaughter your goat and you skin it, and you want to make a carpet. Even making a carpet out of a goat, it's not the easiest thing to do. It could be an apple, a banana, whatever. Try and stretch a banana to be a round carpet. You can't. This is the equivalent. You have your banana, you peel it, you eat the nice juicy, and you want to take the skin and make a round carpet out of that. That is the challenge. It's not UVs that suck. Is that real life has some limitations when it comes to topologies. If something is a watertight spherical object, unless it's stretchy, there's no way of expanding it into a flat surface unless you cut it. Each banana peel, you cut it off and you put each one next to each other. So UVs is just a digital approximation of how we will flatten an object that has curves and all that kind of stuff. So, in one of, I think it was the first show when I showed that this has been a challenge for hundreds of years when it comes to maps, because the Earth is a globe and there's no way to either present it without distortion or cutting up the map. So it's not UVs. This is a centuries-old problem which people have tried to solve in the best possible way, and each way has its own limitations. So UVs is like dealing with real life and saying that life sucks. I hope everyone enjoys their life and has a better experience. But UVs is on its head. What we're trying to do is the problem, not the tools. Yeah, there are some tools which are better than others, but the principle of stretching out something that essentially cannot be stretched out without cutting it in certain pieces is the physical aspect of this. The more you understand the limitations of UVs and the more you grasp on the tools that are made to deal with these problems, the more you'll be able to solve these problems by yourselves. I had the same outlook towards UVs. They do suck and all that. And yet, now that I understand enough of the limitations, I actually enjoy doing a UV session or not. I enjoy solving UV problems. So just stick with it, especially if you don't have an alternative. And as I tell everyone, if you're just doing 3D painting, do an automatic unwrap, whether that is using ZBrush or Cinema 4D's automatic UV packed mode, and then just start painting on your favorite painting software, whether that's the old body paint in Cinema 4D, whether it's a Substance Painter, whether it's a ZBrush and all that. So be patient because you're just facing natural, real life problems. And, try every time you curse about UVs, get go buy a globe or a banana and try and open it up without cutting it and see how that goes.
I have a Cthulhu banana that I've unwrapped before. It's not pretty, but it does work, to your point. To answer somebody's question in the best way possible, as a character artist, are you required for the job to be able to make your banana carpets, or does somebody else do it for you? While some studios do have a team that does UVs on themselves, some AAA studios do. For the most part, as a character artist, you are required to understand how UVs work and actually showcase them on your character beautifully. And there are master classes. I mean, we could talk about UVs and order layout and proper stacking and organization all day long, and still, like, a lot of that is going to be time behind the wheel, as I like to call it. Experience is key. So if you are a character artist or a striving character artist and you wanted to get into the industry, you're going to need to learn UVs, which is why we started covering these topics. Because if you're using our tools, these are some of the ways that you can go ahead and do and get UVs. You need to understand. You need to showcase that you understand the process of the actual job itself and do the best that you can to showcase it clean. A big tip, especially for your portfolio, is please, please, please show me your wireframe and show me your UV layouts. Even if they're the worst on the planet, if you show me that you are using UVs and you show me the layout, I can help you. In a sense, like if I was hiring, I can help you learn how to organize your UVs better. If you hide that from me, then I'm just thinking either A, you don't understand, or B, you're hiding something that you don't want me to see. Therefore, I don't have time for that, and I'll just move on. And a lot of recruiters do think that way. So if you are somebody who is trying to get into this industry, showcase your UVs. Don't be afraid to just put them out there and let them know that this is my character, this is what the UVs look like, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're going to be a character artist for games or film especially, games are starting to use UDIMs more and more if they're not already. I know a lot of studios, one of my favorite studios, that produced God of War, a little tiny game, they use UDIMs in that area. Some of the characters are just ridiculous with how high detailed they are, but they still work on older gen consoles. So UDIMs comes in really handy for helping get a lot of information and stuff like that. So definitely understand the basics of UVs. And then once you're comfortable, move up to the UDIM conversation if you're thriving to be a character artist.
I want to close off at least my segment of this session, replying to Interactive DNA. All your comments are correct. I'm not denying that you're not right. The limitation is not the 3D software in this particular case. The limitation is that images are two-dimensional. So that is what we're mapping. We encode our color data, and this has been historically the case, on flat rectangular images, which is what an image is. So we need, from the 3D point of view, to find a way to project our mesh onto that 2D grid to get the textures through. Now, what you are saying, which is absolutely correct, that a banana is 3D, essentially, in the real world. That's what ZBrush does extremely well, because it directly encodes the color into the vertex color. And that vertex color is a literal representation of what you're asking for. The problem there, though, is that your models become huge, and sometimes you do not need that much density. Now, what was that technology, Ian? What was it called? Where I think it was a Disney Pixar, where each polygon had its own image. It was called.
Oh man,
remember that? There
I
was a
do remember it, but I'm blanking on the term.
If anyone can post it, because I can't remember, I'm blanking as well. There was a technology where it projected a different image on each polygon and eliminated the need. But the way these images were sort of kept in the database was
Point cloud rendering?
PTex. There you go.
Yeah.
So PTex. So PTex tries to handle this by taking what is the smallest flat element in a 3D model, and that is the individual triangle or quad. So what they would do is create a different image for each polygon, and therefore you have the information contained into that. And for various workflows, it was a great solution. But the back-end management of all these small images was a different story. So between these limitations, whether it's a high polygon model or, at the end of the day, the questions you ask here help us understand if there are better ways of doing it. Like today, it was your questions that brought into mind this potential vertex color surrogate method that will allow you to remap UVs between identical topological models and transfer that in the absence of doing that using a baking method. So, we may not be able to write the tools ourselves, but by knowing what your challenges are, we at least can advise or create, give some good ideas onto how certain tools could be improved, or even some technologies improved. I don't know how much. At least in Ian's case, Ian has participated hugely in the improvement of ZBrush over the years. So yeah, this is these are the questions we need to ask, answer, and discuss in order to move the technology forward, whether it's for Maxon or the industry at large. What we are doing here with Ian is we're trying to show you the ways you can use the existing technology to maximize your productivity and your creativity. At the same time, save time. I repeat it all the time. I'm over 57 years old. I don't have much. I've surpassed my 50th percentile of life expectancy. I cannot waste time trying to do things I don't know how to do. Save yourselves a lot of life by learning the tools and by not spending more time than necessary. And learning, in my view, is the way to accelerate your productivity. You can get a faster computer that will do your renders in half the time, but you've already spent 90% of the time building your model. The more you know the tools, the more time you're going to save. And whether you're rendering on one computer over 2 days or 100 computers for 5 minutes, you're not going to be calculating it for the computer. The computer is going to do that in your absence. So learning the tools, in my view, and I think that Ian is going to agree, is the best way to increase your productivity and have less headaches. And we're here for that, right? We want you to ask your questions. I want people to be happy. Someone said that he owes me 10% of his income the other day at that in Montreal. And I didn't claim it, but I'm happy to hear that. I want to hear you people succeeding because of all the help the training team is providing you with. So yeah, on that note, I'm done for the day.
Awesome. Real quick too, I do see a question that came through. I want to answer that real fast, and then we'll start wrapping it up. The question that came through, which is triangles can be your best friend in topology, but how will they project the details in your UV? Do they stretch or deform your textures in any way? So the quick answer is no. They will not. Deform your textures in a way, unless, of course, that triangle itself is causing some sort of artifact already on the mesh, which you should be able to identify. For those of you who don't know, triangles can be your best friend in some cases with characters, but when you're animating, you do want to be careful where you place your triangles. Sometimes triangles will be on the back of the hand. So think of triangles as long as it's not deforming, as long as there's no squishing or movement, I would not put a triangle anywhere here, because when I would squish down, it would cause artifacts and cause issues. But on the back of the hand, triangles would work out really, really well, especially if you're trying to just problem solve and connect your loops. So if your topology is done right, no, triangles will not be seen in the texture. However, there are other aspects that could cause artifacts if they're placed in wrong places. So hopefully that answers your question.
There's another question about, are we going to do post-production, demystifying post-production through Maya? There are no short-term plans for Maxon to acquire Autodesk right now. So I don't think that we're going to do Maya. So yeah, if you have any other information, please let me know.
Yep. Very cool. All right. Well, that being said, thank you all for coming in and hanging out with us. Let's just ignore the middle section of me disappearing randomly for no reason. But yeah, thank you guys for showing up and hanging out with Noseman and I. It's really awesome. Noseman, thank you for taking over those moments I was gone. We're going to go ahead and just real quick showcase my screen. There we go. So, of course, Maxon, this is the tools and stuff that we are using today. Maxon 1 has everything you need to get your creative process going quickly. And like today's session, hopefully we helped demystify some of the elements and the tools that you can use inside of ZBrush and even Cinema 4D. And like Noseman said, I've actually been throwing a lot of my UV jobs at Cinema 4D to just get it done a little bit more on the cleaning side. But either way, if you need something quick, you can unwrap within seconds, which is awesome. And then, of course, too, we have a ton of events like today. We also have an AMA coming up for Friday because we have a sculpt off coming up really, really soon at the ZBrush Summit. So you're going to want to make sure that if you're here in person, you're going to want to come by, say hi. I take high fives, I take hugs, I take payment. It's all good. Just coming out with me somehow, some way, and it will be really awesome. Love to see you in person. That's September 28th through October 1st. Of course, too, going back to the events, we have Maxon Color, we have the Design Animation Tour in Chicago. We have a bunch of stuff coming up. If you want to make sure you know when those events are, come here, check it out, because this gets updated on a regular basis. If you want to start learning today anything, like if I lost you with ZBrush and you're like, I don't even know how to get started, you can get started 100% for free. You don't have to go to YouTube for everything. We actually provide that because we pride ourselves on the training content and the training team specifically, which is designed to help you learn these tools quick, fast, and effective. And sometimes we hang out and we troubleshoot on the fly and we come up with better solutions live like today. So it's really awesome to come through and just get learning ASAP. And also too, if you leave a comment, we do check feedback. So please let us know if there's something as well that you would like to see. And then, of course, I already mentioned the ZBrush Summit, but more specifically, we have workshops at the ZBrush Summit. So if you're here in person between September 28th through October 1st, you can register today to get a workshop. We have a ton of them. Hard surface in ZBrush with final octane rendering. We also have concept sculpting in ZBrush. We have some big names like Pablo Munoz is in here, Henry Cervanka, who have you actually seen his work? If you've at all seen the Redshift car that's been floating around Maxon, a lot of us have been using that. That's done by Henry. We have digital food and creation in ZBrush with Patrick 4D. And we also have Joseph Drust. If you guys know ZBrush at all in the last 10 plus years, you'll know that Joseph Drust is a big name that has also been a massive contributor to the ZBrush and the function of it for many, many years. He's actually coming back to run a workshop, so you're going to want to come and check that out. And some other fun stuff like characters posing with Michael Pavlovich, concept design for film and games with Furio, and then we also have Michael DeFeo, stylized characters. There's a ton of stuff, and these seats are limited, so you're going to want to go ahead and register for that. Reminder, it is in person, so please come here. We'll hang out. You can take a workshop. It'll be great. And then somebody did ask for my my actual work. So I do have an art station. You can come see my stuff. So you can pop in there if you want to see my artwork. I did post that in the actual chat. So if you want to see my work, that's some of the stuff I've done. And that being said, also too, if you are Kyle's going to drop some links in the chat right now for free t-shirts. If you're a Pokemon trainer, you collect them all. All you need to do is pay for shipping, grab that free shirt, and it will be good to go. I do not have the link today on that, but Kyle will be dropping that link and password for you ASAP. With that all being said, thank you guys.
One more comment.
Oh, yes, Mike. I did that again to you.
If you're in the Chicago area, don't forget to look up the Half Rez and check it out. It's a fun event with a lot of inappropriate things like drinking and stuff like that, and a lot of Cinema 4D amongst other things. So check out Half Rez if you're around the Chicago area. I think it's happening at the beginning of September. Don't miss that. And the other thing I want to say is, who's Nightbot from the
Oh, and
Twitch?
Nightbot is a friendly little bot that comes in and helps drop important information. And we run that on the ZBrush channels that are connected to this.
That's fantastic, because when I said I don't know ZBrush, it popped a message, why don't you learn ZBrush or something like that. So I took it very personal. So hi, Nightbot, and thank you, everyone. And thank you, Kyle, for being in the background, saving our lives as usual.
Yes, thank you guys so much. And again, we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Boop, boop, boop.